Thanks very much, Finola. Well, there's nothing left to do. I'll just borrow a few words from Nora. He's nice. He's is it polite, nice, and intelligent. Will you please welcome Shane Kenny?
There are some journalists who might say nice is a little bit too sugary as a description. But anyway, I'm not going to take very long, but I am going to take one particular episode, which is towards the end of the government. We all remember Ghostbusters, don't we? You know, Ghostbusters were the film and the song. You know. I think what we need now in the world is Mythbusters, and there are a hell of a lot more myths going around. If you take misinformation, conspiracy theories, plain lies, they all turn into mythology, which a lot of people believe, and they have to be exploded from time to time. And also misconception can be fostered into a myth. And the one thing I want to leave with you before you go is that there's a very enduring myth about the Belfast Agreement and the peace process, and that is that it was the change of two governments with Bertie Ahern and Tony Blair, which changed the dynamic completely and opened up a pathway, a very open pathway to the Belfast Agreement 7-8 months later. That myth is entirely wrong, completely wrong. And the proof of it is the fact that John Bruton spent 2 months with Tony Blair as Prime Minister. And in those 2 months, all of the steps that needed to be taken to get a renewed ceasefire and get Sinn Féin into the talks were agreed between Tony Blair and John Bruton. And that included, Tony Blair had 2 important meetings with Sinn Féin. What was effectively put together was a package that John Bruton had tried to get John Major to agree to between October and November and December, ending on the 9th of December, a package which would put a fixed date for Sinn Féin to get into the talks. Having been on a ceasefire for over a year and a half, obviously the Republican movement was looking for certainty about when they would actually get into the all-party talks. Of course, it was critically important that the all-party talks were still going on, that they had been fostered and they had been supported and they had been kept going by Nora and by other ministers from the Rainbow government, from Dermot Gleeson going up to the to Stormont to sit in on some of these awfully boring meetings. Even George Mitchell wrote in another book, Not Making Peace, that he was driven almost demented by the fact that people would get up and repeat the same speech that they had given like 30 or 40 times before. So God bless that man. he stayed and did it. There were a couple of times he was threatened himself when after the Garvaghey Road incident, when the British government reversed its decision and allowed the Orange Marchers to go down Garvaghey Road, there was a huge row between John Major and John Bruton about that. Probably one of the toughest exchanges that had ever taken place between an Irish Taoiseach and a British Prime Minister since De Valera responded to Churchill after the end of the Second World War. But anyway, during these 2 months, John Bruton was the first one into Downing Street within 7 days of the election. Tony Blair was completely open to sweeping the carpet clean and allowing, or the table clean, whatever the saying is, and doing everything that he could to resolve the impasse and get Sinn Féin into the talks. Bruton afterwards told me he was seized, that Blair was seized of this issue, and he had put something like 20 to 30 propositions, which arose from the attempt to get John Major to accept a fixed date in December of 1996, it was, in Downing Street. It then would have been a 6-week ceasefire, and a date was given in the plan which John Bruton put forward on behalf of the Rainbow government, that Sinn Féin, with a ceasefire which held, would get into the talks on the 30th of January 1997. So that package was there. Tony Blair took it out, dusted it down, looked at the document that had come from Sinn Féin, posing a lot of questions. Probably the most significant question was, how long would they have to wait before they got into talks? And Tony Blair offered them 6 weeks. And he offered them 6 weeks, and then in an answer to their questions that they put forward in October of the previous year, and there was an attempt to blow the whole thing off the road once again. 2 young RUC community policemen were assassinated, were murdered in the streets of Lurgan, and shot in the back of the head by 2 IRA members. And we were at the, I think a couple of days even after that, Tony Blair decided that he was still going to give this document with the offer to Sinn Féin. But it was a huge attempt to derail the peace process. That showed me that there was a split coming in the IRA. And Bruton had, in October to December of 1996, divined that the peace group on the Army Council and within the IRA were stronger again, and they were in control. That's why he tried to get Major to accept this peace plan, because he believed it would work. Tony Blair did believe it would work, and despite the fact that these awful murders took place, the document was sent to Sinn Féin. Then in the last week, the final piece of the jigsaw was put together by John Bruton and Tony Blair, but it was put together in the United Nations building, where they were both at the Earth Summit on the 24th of June of that year. And they finally agreed a 12-page document which was about keeping decommissioning from being used by unionists and others to roadblock the discussions of the all-party talks, so that they could get down to the substance and make an agreement. And that deal was done by John Bruton. The package with the 6-month ceasefire was agreed. The decommissioning document was finally agreed, and it was really then up to the IRA. Inter alia, when you read the book, you'll see the quotations from what Tony Blair said at the time. He gave an effective ultimatum to the IRA. We need a ceasefire in the middle of July with the 6 weeks to make sure that the IRA could get into the talks when they reassembled in September of 1997. 2 weeks later, the IRA called a ceasefire. Now, was there a Bertie Ahern effect here? Bertie Ahern got into the Taoiseach's office on the 26th of June, 2 days after the final document about getting the IRA and Sinn Féin to agree was presented to them. Alistair Campbell's diaries give us the story, really, and I'll tell you what he said. Bertie went to London to see Tony Blair, and after he left, the building, Tony Blair was not at all impressed with what he had of his meeting with Bertie Ahern. In fact, he turned to Alistair Campbell and he said that Bertie Ahern was just trotting out endlessly the Sinn Féin line. And he told him that he feared that the peace process had taken a setback. That's there in Alistair Campbell's Irish diaries. You don't see that reported very much in the Irish press. But that's the reality. Bertie likes to think that he continues with this mythology that he enveloped the whole thing. And I think those 2 months have to be carefully examined by historians. The story is there. I think I've given most of the documentation. I'm sure others will be able to find different things to add to it. But the deal was done while John Bruton was still at Taoiseach. Okay, that's really it. What I want to say is I like Bertie Ahern, in fact, and I worked very closely with him at times when he was a senior member of Fianna Fáil government. I helped solve an electricity strike for him, the last complete strike by the ESB, which then did everything. It not only sold the electricity, but it brought it to your house. All of the industrial organisations had they failed completely. And I'd had a rather bad night the night before. I had a row with the Director of Human Affairs in RTE, and probably had 1 pint too many when I got back the next morning. But I said that the best thing we can possibly do here is try and get the leader of the trade union movement and the head of personnel relations, human resources, I think they were called at that time, HR, and we got them on air. And it was quite extraordinary. It never happened in a radio broadcast before or since. I caught the trade union official out in not having listened to what the HR man was saying, and it was all about whether a payment, continuing this payment that they got for doing some particular task, that would continue in a new pay deal, and they thought it was going to be dropped. And the man was saying, no, we'll consider keeping that going. I got Bertie Ahern, I knew him so well, I knew his private secretary, got the team in the studio to call him, and we got Bertie on the air, and on the air he invited the two guys down to his office to sort out the strike, and they did a couple of hours later. So I do like Bertie Ahern, but I think he has to consider how he can be a little bit more generous to, as Nora said, the people who set the table and cook the food and all the rest of it. Only the dessert was left for preparation. So I think he's got to understand that, as Nora said, quoting from George Mitchell said the opportunity for those two men was created by their predecessors, and that is absolutely true, and it needs to be acknowledged. And what John Bruton achieved needs to be recognised and also credited, a credit given to him that he did that before the ceasefire was called. I don't think Bertie has tried to make it appear like he was really helping a lot with getting the IRA to see the light. They knew the light. They had been involved in this negotiation. They were right across what John Bruton tried to do with Major in October to December of 1996. So come on, let's have a decent bit of credit where it is due for a lot of hard work. Thank you, and thank you so much for all appearing here on a dark and slightly damp November evening. It was a hard job getting back into this book, but it was the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, where there wasn't a single mention of John Bruton. That's really prompted me to get out the notes, the little bits of paper, the hotel lit booklets that I'd written things in. You'll get a very good account of how the two, the Prime Minister and the Taoiseach, had to deal with the murder of the two RUC men, because they were at an EU summit in Amsterdam at the time, and they had to go out and face the media together. Well, you'll find all of the interactions of that. Then Alistair wasn't anywhere with his very sharp stiletto pen. He didn't seem to make notes of that at all, but it's all there. I hope you enjoy reading it. I'd like to say I enjoyed writing it. Well, I did when it got to the end. So thank you very, very much indeed for your support.
Thanks. I'd just like one final thanks again. I'd just like to thank Finola and again I'd like to thank Shane Kenny. Shane will be here to sign a few copies. So thank you all for coming and enjoy the rest of your night. Thanks very much.
Sign mine there. This is mine to sign on there.
Don't forget, Saoirse is probably going to be a candidate for the presidency.
I'm realising it's a lefty as well. Every senior leader of the world is a left-hand right. Yeah. You're high function, you're not left-hand right.